Welcome to the Phoenix Downbeat. I'm Drew Kreisman. That over there is Ira Kreisman. I can see him, but you can't. I can also see Ryan Laney of Overship Air Drive. Nope.
Overship Air Drive? Come on, man.
So
Guys,
close.
This is why every time I try to do it the same, because when I mess with it... No, it's Airship Overdrive. I'm pretty sure. The words are literally right in front of my face. I guess they didn't already know it, but...
Airship Overdrive, your favorite guitar pedal effect centric video game music cover band.
Yeah, put that on a t-shirt. Hey, on this episode, we're diving deep into a piece of music from Final Fantasy XVI, one of my favorite, most modern pieces of music. It's called Ascension from Masayoshi Soken, and it covers a lot. We're going to dive into that. We've got a couple of caveats here at the beginning. One thing we wanted to start with is letting everybody know that here in a couple episodes, it'll be our 19th overall. Going to be doing a Q&A smorgasbord grab bag episode. If you've got questions, send them our way, and Ryan will answer them.
Yeah, anything and everything that's music or video game music specific. For the listeners, if you're relatively new or an old-time listener, I have 2 degrees in music education. I was a middle school and high school band director for about 10 years, and I've been a composer for coming up on about 17 or 18 years now. So any questions you might have, from simple stuff talking about like what's a chord type, I hear you use these numbers sometimes, all the way to big grandiose things like what's a leitmotif, and I hear you use these terms like inversions and retrograde. What are these things? Please send them our way. We're doing a whole episode coming up soon that's going to be purely listener Q&A. So send them our way. Find us on Blue Sky, on the podcast Discord, any of those avenues.
Absolutely. And I did see 1 or 2 people just send like, what about this song? Like maybe a little more of a question than that, but hey, we'll play a clip and talk about it if those are what we get. Whatever you want us to talk about, we'll do our best to cover it as best we can. So it's gonna be fun.
Even questions like, here's a piece of music from a game. Why does it sound so suspenseful? Or why does it sound so heartfelt? Even questions like that, don't feel like you have to have the, capital M music theory terminology. You can ask it in layperson terms, and I'll do my best to respond and to answer and help you understand music a little better.
All right, the other thing that we need to do before we get into listening to this piece of music is a spoiler warning. Final Fantasy XVI is still a relatively new game. I know there are a lot of people out there who'd love to play it that haven't gotten the chance to all the way through, including, I believe, Ryan. And so we are going to talk about this character theme, and we're going to have to do some spoilery conversation about who Dion Lesage is and his place in Final Fantasy history, his place in this story, why this piece of music has to be the way that it is. So I think all of that, I just wanted to let people know, we are going to talk about the character. We're going to spoil some things, but not the end of Final Fantasy XVI or any of the major plots surrounding Clive and Jill and the rest of that gang. It's going to be a Dion-centric conversation. And as such, I want to say a couple of things that I looked up. First of all, Lesage is French for the wise. Despite the fact that I think the best place to begin in talking about a piece of music is with another piece of music, I thought about bringing this on as a bonus, Ryan. There's a in-game bard who begins with the title Spoony Bard, because it's Final Fantasy. Of course. Great stuff. And he sings various pieces throughout the game in the background. And the reason I didn't bring it on is because there's crosstalk. There's a conversation going on over the top of it. But I thought I would read the lyrics to the Spoony Bard's description of Dion the Bold. His song goes, "Oh, come hear the tale of Lord Dion the Bold, who's tamed worms 1,000 and slain that 10-fold. 100 full legions the young dragoon led, and watched as 1,000,000 turned tail and fled. His lance levels mountains, it sunders the deep, the skies over storm brace for every leap. And should the sun set on the empire's shores, his name will live on forever and more."
So I got to ask right off the bat, is this the kind of bard's song, bard's tale that is actually telling of his legitimate acts of grandeur? Or is it a little bit of like a tongue-in-cheek, it's all just, to talk him up a little bit?
Well, that's one of the great things about Dion, right? Is he is both legend, and you might argue he's one of these characters that tends to live up to the legend, right? Are the numbers inflated a bit? Probably there, but again, we are
bard.
Yeah. But he is the prince of the most powerful empire in the world, and he is the dominant of Bahamut. So he's both a dragoon and he turns into the king of dragons. So he's on face value pretty badass.
This dude sounds awesome. I mean, I've not played the game properly yet, but clearly this has to be like the best character in the game, right?
I mean, if you ask me, yes. I love it. He's got one of my favorite character introductions in the history of Final Fantasy, when he just gets to leap off the edge of the cliff and say, all right, I'm in the fight now. And you just see him as the man disappear behind the edge of the cliff, and then he flies out as the dragon on the other side and turns the tide of battle. And it's just like, this dude rules. One other big spoiler to just get out of the way right here at the beginning. Dion is also our first, certainly most prominent gay character in Final Fantasy history. There are others out there, but as a main character, like you got to do some reading between the lines or whatever. He just has a partner, a male partner in this game, and it's clear as day, and there's no real anything else about it. And it's one of the other things that makes him super cool in my book. So to answer your question, he's my favorite character in the game.
Nice. Final Fantasy 16 is still not terribly far down, but it is somewhat far down my video game backlog that I'm currently working through. Currently, I'm on Octopath Traveler 0 and UFO 50, but I'm amped for it whenever I get around to it.
Ira, do you have any other introductory thoughts on Dion Lesage?
I think it is interesting that Bahamut is the idol. What do they call him? Not eidolons, icon of light, because so often Bahamut is non-elemental damage.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting. I think it sets him up to be a figure of awe, you can say hyperbolic things about. People go, yeah, I buy it. But also the Holy Empire of Sanbreque, from whence he hails, it is, as you might expect, a bit corrupt. And he is the character in this organization, in this family, who really means it when he says the noble things. So yeah, he's great. I don't know if I'd say he's my favorite. After all, this is a game with Clive and Jill and Sid and Joshua in it.
Sid is...
Yeah, I was going to say, you weren't thinking about Sid a moment ago, were you?
I did forget about Sid for a moment. I still think I go with Dion, but Sid is such a great character.
So Dion's amazing. His role in the Empire and in the story at large is pretty great. Yeah, I'm a fan.
Two other quick introductory thoughts on the piece of music. One is that I think it's interesting because this fits into two different categories. It's a character theme for absolutely, but this is also a battle theme. So the other thing that I wanted to mention was that Soken does a really interesting thing that we can maybe take a look at another time. In Final Fantasy 16, the characters who have main themes, almost all of them start very small. Sid's theme, for example, is just like some drums and an acoustic guitar. And by the time he's doing big Ramu things, it's a full orchestra and a full choir singing the exact same melody. We get a similar thing with Dion, though it's not as extreme. And in fact, the smallest version of his plays after this. But we are introduced to this theme throughout the story in smaller, more pared down versions. But this is its ultimate evolution. It's final Pokemon, whatever, like the biggest form of it, right? And so when you get to this point in the story where, again, spoilers, your party, Clive and the gang, is going to come up in a confrontation against Dion. We get this, I don't know what you would call it, climactic, dramatic. What are the epic piece of music?
Let's hear it.
stop us right there for a second.
All right, so already I gotta ask, like, when it comes to this theme, is this something that we hear from Dion earlier in the game, or is this like the first time we hear these themes and this intensity is when he, I don't want to like misspeak, becomes Bahamut or like summons Bahamut? I'm not really sure exactly what's happening in this scenario.
Yeah, we had heard hints of this bit, but I think this is the first time it's anywhere near this part intense. And this bit had been actually clipped off. This front bit that's so epic. The next part we're going to hear is basically Dion's theme, just amped up a bit. But this front part here, I think, signifies confrontation. This is, he is one thing that Bahamut does often in this game, and I guess generally in Final Fantasy, right, is he looms over. He casts a literal shadow over the city. And what's happening in this scene, again, spoilers, is Bahamut is actually beginning to attack the city he is sworn to protect. And we do not know why. And so Dion has mostly been an ally and certainly not an enemy to this point. But Clive and the gang have to engage him in battle because he's attacking his own city. And so this first, whatever I just played, 45 seconds, I think signifies that turning of the giant beast, that Godzilla is loose, and oh no, he's not on our side this time.
And already we're hearing a lot of musical elements that are very, very well kind of showing this exact thing you're talking about, of like looming over something, impending doom, and a little bit of confusion also from what you were just describing, where it's like, why is he doing what he's doing, right? Let me ask you guys, if you can explain, what are the actual musical things done that might be imposing that idea in your mind?
I can begin where it ends there with that final, like, descending la la, right? That feels like it's coming down on you. That there's a very descending note of a big climactic thing, but it ends coming down instead of going up or staying where it is. So it's descending upon you.
And this piece sort of echoes the piece that represents the nation as a whole, which I think I described last time as not choosing for a march because it's more harpsichord and organ-y. And it's got some of that idea going on here also, I feel like. I don't know if that sows confusion, but it does feel very grandiose.
Yeah, it's also got all those little beats that we talked about earlier in some earlier episodes about like the Mars movement of Holst's Planet Suite, where it's very downbeat oriented. We hear these low strings, possibly using that wood on the string mechanism as well. And it's all very just downbeat oriented. You hear this constant like march, basically. Chung, 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 just going nonstop. But yet the music around it, it's set in a minor key, a very blatantly minor key. So it's like, oh, you take those two things alone of this slower march. It's not your fast Sousa style 120. It's closer to like probably a 104 or so of just impending doom. You add that on top of a little bit of the dissonance we have going on there, and all of those things totally check out for, the musical side of it, of like, oh yeah, impending doom, something bad coming, but it's not like happening yet. All of that rings super, super clearly in the composition here.
Yeah, in earlier versions of the piece, the percussion is largely absent. Didn't have those big Metal Gear Solid drums going on again, sort of announcing the confrontation, right? And then again, a big spoilery thing that we did not know had happened. This is revealed to us after the battle. And I'll say this as spoiler-free as I can, but Dion had to slowly march into the throne room and tell his father that enough is enough. It's one of my favorite scenes in all of Final Fantasy history. He just has to walk in there as Captain Dragoon, King of the Dragons, and say, I stand up to you, the Emperor, who is my father, because this is wrong. And so his slow dirge, his slow march into, and then something happens, which I'll just not spoil.
Yeah.
And then we end up having to fight him as a giant dragon. And it's so good. But yeah, so that slow march in the drums, I think, also embody that bit. And then we get what I think is Dion Lesage's main theme, just amped up for the battle. that about?
That sounds so cool. So here's the one point I wanted to bring out in our discussion of this song. That and this is the perfect spot where it really like is a good talking point. Have either of you ever watched the series How I Met Your Mother?
I've seen clips, but I've never watched the series.
Handful of episodes, but yeah.
Yeah, so there's this one scene where Barney, kind of who's like the sort of like, womanizer, playboy style character. They're out at this, I think it's a New Year's Eve party where they rented a limo and they're driving around town, and he has a CD that's his like Get Pumped party playlist. And he says very clearly when he puts it on that a Get Pumped playlist shouldn't have any downs. Everyone always thinks that you should have ups and downs, but I want it to be all rise, all up, 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 which, as any experienced musician will tell you, no, that doesn't work for more than like a minute and a half if you're lucky. That's why fanfares are so short, because you can only go up for so long before it's like, we just need a breather, right? This section of the song is a great like area where they realized, oh, this is super epic, super intense, and literally a scale of like gods fighting gods in space is kind of what you see in the visuals of it, right? And yet we can't just have constant rise, constant increase of tension, constant increase of all the levers you can, push and pull in music. So what did they do in this section here? Did you guys hear something that they did to kind of play with that?
Yeah, well, they pare down to like a handful of instruments a couple of times, right? The dynamics get really intense, and then you'll have those sort of big orchestra hits. So it'll dum 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 wah, dum 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 wah. Right? It's the way it actually gets quiet for like you said, such an epic piece is pretty cool.
I already have any thoughts?
Yeah, and those wahs, as Drew put them, they do ascend sort of, well, everything if it's bringing it all down and slowing it, or not even slowing it down, but bringing it more quiet and paring down the instrumentation, there is still some ascension, and it feels to me like it parallels the a similar sound from Libere Fatale. It's not quite a screech, but a low to high violin-y sound.
Yeah, they'll call it like an orchestra hit or an orchestra rip sometimes, where it's just this big glissando of notes going up or a run of a scale of some kind. If I try to play it on the piano here for a second, it's kind of like just doing a little bit of a... which doesn't sound quite as grandiose on a single piano, but on a full orchestra, it gets that really, really intense setting. I'm going to ask Drew in a second here to play back that same section we just listened to. And for the listener, listen to it this time, focusing on how they have the rises excuse me. The rise is being contrasted with some of the more like brought back things. There's a cool thing they do somewhere near the middle second half, somewhere in this little section here, where you start with these these basically block chords. I'm just gonna make up some chords here that sound something like this. But the second time you hear it, it's like 1 or 2 bars later, they add these little string or possibly flute notes above that. And it's a little thing, it's a very small thing that still amps up the intensity little by little, but then it doesn't have that much more added. It's kind of like adding just a pinch of salt onto a dish. And then finally, we have the tiramisu to kind of bring it back down a little bit toward the second half. Listen to this again and listen for those parts where it gets slightly more intense, but then they scale it back. Did you catch it?
Well, we shift, I think, I don't know if it's a minor chord all the way through or a minor scale all the way through, but it feels like it's an oppressive scale. And then for a moment, it's kind of a cheery, actually, this is maybe okay scale. And then we go back to no, this is messed up scale.
That's a good catch, because not only do they scale back the density of the instrumentation, there's a lot less going on, to maybe some violas and cellos happening, but it's also, for a minute there, we are in a major setting. It sounds very like relaxed, but not for long. Like I just said, it's not for long.
One of the other things about this particular melody, before we get into that back and forth that we've been talking about, Dion's theme, and I think it's present throughout the entire piece, is this feeling of regality. Like this is the song of a prince, and it feels that way. But I also have a very strange question for you that's related to that, Ryan, which is, this sounds to me more like classical music than a lot of stuff that, while we would say, oh yeah, this piece sounds inspired by Mozart or Beethoven or Bach with Uematsu, you could go through a ton of them where that's the case. But something, I don't know, it feels like those pieces stopped off in John Williams land a little bit, or in Joe Hisaishi land a little bit, and then came to Final Fantasy. This feels almost like just straight, I don't know, Bach or something, and I'm not sure what is giving me that vibe.
Do you want me to tell you exactly why you're getting that vibe?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Here, give me 1 second. I'm going to find the right setting on my piano here. So here's why this particular song sounds like you're going, oh, hey, this is Mozart, this is Bach, this is something from that era, right? Simply put, it's in harmonic minor. That's the only reason. If we took the theme of Dion and we took that melody part only, and I played it on a harpsichord setting instead, like this, that sounds like something straight out of a Bach, playbook of some kind. And you can also harmonize it super easily with just your minor 1, major 5 back and forth, which is what we use in harmonic minor. Harmonic minor is one of those modes that just screams from the rooftops, it's from the Baroque or classical era, because it's just got enough tension to the minor setting that it delivers, well, tension. That's what you're looking for. Later in the Romantic era and moving forward, they produced even more methods of making things even more tense, even more harmonically dense as well. And then before, in the kind of medieval and Renaissance eras, they were just starting to kind of like experiment with having that sharp 7 or that raised 7 in the natural harmonic key to then become harmonic minor. So for an example, here's what it sounds like if I play it with a very simplified harmony below it. Now here's the same thing, but if I didn't have the raised 7 on the harmonic scale. Hear that difference?
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's wild.
And that's literally all it is. A lot of this song, even though they do jump keys pretty frequently, actually, a lot of it is based in something along like those lines of just it's harmonic minor. There's something in a later section I'll point out as well that is a bit of a callback to another piece we've referenced at least 3 times in this podcast, but I'll discuss that when we get there.
cutting it off right there feels so wrong, but I also have to.
It does.
It's like where the thing's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, and it's gonna be so monstrously epic. Wait, we'll get there.
That's the equivalent of like when you end a scale on 7.
Right. Well, especially because I was making a big deal about how earlier when we hear that particular phrase that the piece begins with, it comes down to descend upon us. Bum, 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 bum. But here, instead of coming down and giving us that note, it's just a big bit of open space, and then a violin does an epic thing that we'll listen to in a minute. But before that, I think we get a lot more of that good, like you said earlier, some of the dynamic stuff. It reminded me of some of the bits we talked about with the battle with the 4 fiends. I made a big deal about when it all cuts out and the hi-hat goes we get like a violin version of that here for a second, where there's a big noise and then everything goes away and the violin just goes
yeah. And the section right there where you cut it off, it could easily go one of 2 ways. It could either be building you up to kind of pull the rug out from under your feet and go, nope, there's not a gigantic resolution and like here's the gigantic huge chord. It could also be doing the thing where it's just pulls it out and then it's very sparse all of a sudden to kind of play that trick on the listener. And Drew kind of gave it away just now of what's going to happen, but we're not going to get the gigantic like here's a big delivery moment. We're going to kind of pull it back a little, but also keep the intensity going. We're pulling and pushing different levers as far as instrumentation, instrument density. The speed of the notes is also, like the rhythm is just simply one of the levers you can push and pull as a musician or as a composer. And we're going to hear a really interesting one right here in a little bit.
Or just right now. I could just do it right now.
All right now. Oh, that part's so cool.
That's so cool. The only thing I don't like about that is they put that in the trailers, and so when I first heard it in the game, I knew that violin bit was coming, and but it's not like it ruined it, but still.
So this violin bit here, this is the part I was just gonna talk about when we got there. Is there something a little bit different that we haven't quite heard? And it's specifically, I'll give you a hint. It's specifically in the note choices that are written for it. Do either of you hear something that kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge might reference a song we've talked about in recent episodes that we're getting from this? And I'll play it slowly once to kind of like attune your ear to it.
Okay, I heard several different pieces of Final Fantasy music as you were doing that. Several notes sounded like Final Fantasy 4. Then it sounded like Final Fantasy 9. And then I lost track.
Ira?
It's got a vague Castlevania vibe, but that might be the harpsichord in my head still.
So once again, Ira nails it where we've got the Castlevania vibe. We got that sharp 4 plus the flat 6 in a minor setting, which is what gets this part right here. That's like another blatant use of Baroque music, Castlevania music, getting more and more dense compared to just like flat Baroque, you'd call it. It's getting more into the classical and romantic era type stuff. But also, if we take this, we're in the key of B minor right now. What if I played something like this?
Nice.
Yeah.
It's the Sephiroth theme. It's literally the one-winged angel, and all they're doing is in a minor setting, B minor in this case. And we're going to have that 5th note of the scale go between the 5, the sharp 4, and the flat 6. And so you get that sound, that typical, like, intense Baroque sound for free. Yeah, something like that.
That's awesome. I love it when Final Fantasy music can reference other Final Fantasy music, especially when it's not in an obvious way, like sticking the prelude in on a harp, which, by the way, Soken does all the time. There's prelude all over this soundtrack, which I love, but that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's not even like necessarily a direct callback to One Winged Angel. It's just the thing that is so easy to put in this minor setting without getting too outlandishly dissonant, and it just works. He harmonized it very, very differently here than what Uematsu did, but it just works.
The other thing that I feel about this part, and we sort of talked about it in relation to Battle with the Four Fiends, but it feels very stabby, very dually. Like this is the part we're well into the fight at this point. This is, and again, I'm not quite sure other than shorter staccato notes, what's making me feel that way. But, or maybe because the first time that part plays at the very beginning, when you're first introduced to Dion, is when he literally locks up with Odin in battle, and that like right as they clash is when that violin part comes in. So maybe that's what's giving me that vibe. But it feels very dually, back and forth, swords clashing to me.
Yeah, and that's a good way of putting it. It sounds like you've almost got like two fencers doing a very like dance like Kill Bill style, maybe not Kill Bill. What movie am I thinking of? Pirates of the Caribbean we've talked about, where it's like fencers less than like two juggernauts just going at it, right? It's delicate, it's a dance, and yet still very life-threatening.
And considering this fight takes place a lot in the air, there's a lot of flying in this one, and that quick violin sounds very flighty. Is not quite the correct word, but it's a similar idea.
I would say flighty.
It also does a pretty great trick where, the first time around, I think it's just one violin that's jamming out there and some other stuff comes in. And the descending line it ends on feels almost gentle in a way. But then once the choir and the drums are in, that descending line is bum, 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 bum. And it is. They add all the extra instruments to you. So now it is a clash of the gods, right? It starts, actually, now that perfectly parallels one of my favorite things about this whole section of this game. This confrontation begins between like two people standing on the street and goes into space where the gods fight each other. Right? So it's such an escalation or an ascension of drama, and the stakes keep ratcheting up and up and up. So doing that in the piece where you have this incredible melody introduced on one instrument, and then the entire orchestra plays it back. So cool.
So, side question: when are we going to record a 3-man a cappella of this song? I mean, Drew's got the lead already.
I should just try to edit together what we've already done and see.
Oh no! Well, speaking of that, I'm not going to try to sing it too much, but there's like you were saying, a lot of that feels very Baroque, and I know classical means a specific thing in music, but a very classic symphonic kind of sound. But then there's a part that feels very modern to me, where it goes bum 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 bum. There's a sort of a bass, almost percussion that's offset, syncopated. Maybe I think I'm using that word right, to what's going on. That feels more like a dance piece or a rock piece.
Yes, and this is something I was going to mention at the very end once we finished everything. Yet again, I wrote with the segues here. Earlier in, I think it was the section we just listened to, or no, it was one before that. There are some parts where it is syncopated. It's not the typical classical Baroque style where everything is very downbeat oriented. We have stuff that has like the da 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 dun da da dun da, where it's very upbeat oriented, and the ones where it's like the dotted rhythm, bum 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 bum. Bum, 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 which is like practically a cardinal sin in typical Baroque music. You would never write that because it sounds too jazzy. It sounds too out of place compared to what they usually wrote. But they're doing it here. And so it's a great combination of that modern rhythmic and modern motive sensibility with within harmonic. Let me clarify that with an space harmonic sensibility that makes it sound like princes fighting, like that royal Castlevania sort of sound.
Yeah. Which is, what it is. But princes who have turned into gods, as we've talked about. Oh man. Yeah. All right. A little more. This might take us to the loop. I think we can listen to this last section here in one. Oh, I've always wanted to say this. And down the stretch they come.
What a good turnaround there.
Wow.
How it builds up and you have those both harmonic and the rhythmic building up. It drops out and then it's like the all male choir suddenly with the da 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 da, and then it goes back into the loop. That's a very clever thing that you don't frequently see.
Yeah. And again, not to keep harping on the point, but it's worth making. He actually does this in the baseline battle music for Final Fantasy 16 as well. And I remember the first time I heard it, almost thinking that it got too pretty and quiet in the middle of the fight. Remember that? I remember sitting there, I was like, this is odd in the middle of that. It's beautiful, but does he know we're fighting a giant wind lady? And so this, I think, does it in ways that are slightly less make your go, oh, but it does get really, really quiet for a piece of music that, so again, sometimes plays while you're shooting lasers and fireballs at each other in space.
the fight playlist, it can't be all rise though, right? It's got to have some drops, especially when you might be having this battle for, isn't it like a pretty long fight too, like half an hour or more?
Yeah, it takes a minute. Yes.
What were you going to say?
Some of these fights are kind of sad. I think especially this one and the one against, as Drew just put it, the giant wind lady. They can be a little, oh no, we don't want this to go the way it's got to go. We want this to end in perhaps a way that is a little less violent than because some of the guys you fight is like, yeah, F that dude, I'm ready to bust him in the head. But this one's, I kind of like that it drops out for a moment and then builds back up again. There's a very sad violin right there. Some of those solo bits feel very lonely, very sad. And because, as Drew is describing, Dion has to walk in there and say, no, all of you are wrong and I'm right. And we're not going to do this. And now suddenly we're fighting him. So he does feel very alone and very sad at times. And that's a lot of this game. And so I think that very sad violin is, I think, very important.
So this is actually a really good segue into a song that I wanted to share with you guys. I'm going to send the link here to Drew.
Excellent.
This is the one.
I love bonus music.
But when Ira was just talking about, and I think Drew also mentioned where it's like these battles that, maybe you didn't want to happen. It's kind of there's some literary term for this where it's like the battle is won, but you didn't want to necessarily win it, like the conflicted hero sort of trope of some kind.
Like a Pyrrhic victory.
Yeah, very much. And there's a song from my favorite video game of all time, which is Shadow of the Colossus. And give us a listen and let me know if you think this sounds similar. Have either of you played this game before?
We have a funny old story about this game. I did, yes. Ira stopped because he correctly figured out right away that play the game was a morally bad thing to do.
Yeah. I beat the first big monster and decided, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? This is awful. I just killed this thing that's not doing anything to anybody because a disembodied voice told me to. No, I don't think this game is for me. And then I learned later that I was morally correct.
Yeah, without spoiling the game, there is definitely a like moral ambiguity to like what you're doing. Part of why it's my favorite game of all time is because it's a very minimalistic game. There is a story, but they don't like. There's almost no text in the game. There's like 3 cutscenes after the beginning of the game, but yet there's still a great story that puts you in this position of like, I'm a murderer, basically. I'm killing these things for what I feel like is a righteous reason. But in the end, for reasons I won't explain, there's a lot of like, hey, did you really do what you were setting out to do? Or, like, were you actually just in what you were pursuing here? This music here, this is the one for listeners at home. This is it's called The End of the Battle. I've heard it with other terms as well. The one that we just listened to was kind of the extended version. Usually it's just half that long. And it's the song that plays every time you beat one of the 16 colossi in the game. And for reasons I'll let you figure out on your own to play the game, go play it. It's my favorite game of all time. It's wonderful. There is definitely a soured victory in all of these victories that you have. And even at the end, in that middle section there, when there's like a major chord playing, and then it just kind of just drives a screwdriver into your side of this little bit of dissonance where it's like, oh, wait, something's not quite right. I thought this was like the end of the battle. Where's the big fanfare? There's not a fanfare. There's just this sense of like, oh, something's wrong here. And that's the exact kind of vibe that I got from that end section before it loops here in Ascension, where it's like, oh yeah, we're winning potentially, but something's still not quite right,
Yeah. That's it. Also had those similar, different descending notes and the repetition of them over and over again. But again, it reminded me of that. I mean, quite literally, this game is called Shadow of the Colossus, right? It is a shadow that looms over. And I had no idea you were going to bring this one up today. I did mention earlier that Bahamut quite literally often casts a shadow. In one of the first scenes where he flies up to like the camp where they're stationed and having this battle out in the field, he's the size of the camp. This is right. It's an enormous dragon. Not quite as big as some of these colossi, as it were, especially that last one. But it still gives you that sense of there is something foreboding, but also that is looming over you, looking down on you in a way that is uncomfortably big. That's another phrase I like. It's so big it makes you uneasy.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Which is something that for Final Fantasy 16, I mean, knowing what I know about it, that's exactly the vibe that they're going for. They want you to feel like you are the little fish in the big sea, right? When you start seeing these gigantic, do they call them summit, or it was icons, what they're called in 16?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you see these things flying around, and of course when this is the music for Bahamut, like that's pretty much like in most Final Fantasies, it's like the peak summon or guardian force or whatever is frequently Bahamut, or in some cases some variation of Bahamut. So it just works so well. Okay, a random question: what's everyone's favorite incarnation of Bahamut in a Final Fantasy game?
10.
That was quick.
Yeah.
He's got the wheel on his back and he's very colorful.
the art style on that thing with like the pinks and the yellows against his black is gorgeous. You're absolutely right. Well, Ira thinks mine, I think honestly, is either it's Bahamut 0 from 7 or just the Bahamut from 6. Like just the graphical, just awesomeness, even if it's only 2D in Final Fantasy 6, is just beautiful.
I really like how in the original Final Fantasy, Bahamut is the one to give you your class upgrades. I think so narratively, even though there's not a lot of narrative in that game, it's more about the situation. I think that's really interesting. Design wise, though, I think Bahamut 0 is pretty cool.
Yeah, that first time you get it and then you actually use it in battle and it's like, whoa, the screenshots from GamePro didn't tell me it was gonna look like this.
Also, shout out to Bahamut from Final Fantasy 15. I feel like super underrated and a really cool version of it, where sometimes in one of our summons episodes, I said, Bahamut kind of just is a big dragon. Some of these other summons are a lot more interesting. Everybody's got dragons. Final Fantasy's got a walking city. Why don't we talk more about Alexander? Damn it. Big dragon. So I tend to like the ones that's why I think I picked 10, because he's looks a bit different, right? And then 15's blew me away. I was like, this is a really cool interpretation of an idea that hasn't always been iterated on this much. So I liked that.
Bahamut from 10 is also pretty much the MVP if you ever speed run that game.
Yep.
They just abuse the heck out of Bahamut and giving Yuna like strength stats. I think it's like a really weird build, but it just annihilates everything in your path, and you can finish the game in like 3 hours if you remove the cutscenes.
That said, this Bahamut is also a person, which is one of the things that Ira and I have long talked about. We love to see the summons extrapolated more. You mentioned 6, and in 6 they're kind of presented as both a little more. They're people, they're human beings, they're espers, they have a whole society, they have personalities. In 7, they're just magical powers that come out of a rock. In 8, they play a big role in the story, and in 10, but they don't really have a ton of personality, right? And so in this, I love that there's this other side of them. So I did want to play, as I mentioned earlier, the more pared down human version that comes after this in the kind of solace and wake of the destruction that Dion has wrought and everything that's happened as we near the end of the story. And he has a quiet scene with his partner.
Oh man, take me to that hotel bar with the speakeasy downstairs. Oh, there is some somberness to that song right there.
I was gonna say, and someone who's just had their heart broken and knows how to play the piano just pulled up, has had a couple of drinks.
Yeah,
that is the song of a broken man. At that point, you take all of that instrumentation and all the choir, and it doesn't even sound like a Prince anymore. It's all, like you said, it's just a jazzy sort of lounging around. Some of these notes may or may not be in the rhythm of the piece, whatever. I'm just stumbling. I'm still who I am. I'm still who I was, but barely.
Yeah, there's no real foundation in your life for a brief moment of time.
Aw. poor Dion.
but don't spoil it for me. I don't know what exactly the heartbreak is. Don't spoil it.
But that is not the end. I will say that much. That piece of music is not the end of the story, and there is so much to that one. And I would, Ryan, highly recommend that you get to it when you can, and maybe even watch it as a movie sometimes. I know some people have all kinds of feelings and opinions about that. And if you're I gotta play it guy, I gotta play it then, because I don't look down on the gameplay the way a lot of people do. But I do think that just as a story experienced, even without the gameplay, it's one of the strongest in the franchise. And the way it works, its character themes, its music. I think Soken's an incredible composer. We sort of picked on one of his pieces of Final Fantasy XIV music for being a little silly, but I think it's really great, and I do think characters like this are a big part of the reason why.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on this one, or questions from a musical perspective?
I mean, my final thought is that it really is just a beautiful piece of music, and it from a programmatic point of view, it does its thing very well. It ascends, it takes us through the battle. It represents the character and the ideals of his nation as he sees them, and also lets us fight a giant dragon in space, which is amazing. So I like it a lot, and I like everything you walked us through about how it builds up and then lets us ease off for a minute and then builds up again. I think all that's incredible. I've only played this game once. I've only played through this event once, but I've heard this piece of music many, many times just because I think it sounds so cool.
My final thought on it is, again, in the tradition of Final Fantasy, I think most often than not, or maybe always, the giant epic piece that invokes Baroque classical music and does it, like you said, it just invokes like parts of Sephiroth, right? It's almost like Dancing Mad, One Winged Angel, Liberi Fatali, even like Otherworld being like villain music in a way. We sort of talked about that, right? It's there for the final battle. I think usually that big epic piece of music in Final Fantasy is almost always there for the villain. And while you are fighting Dion you're fighting Bahamut while this piece of music plays, he's not a villain. And that's one of the other reasons, because I think this piece of music fits very nicely into that category. If I was making a Final Fantasy playlist that's epic Latin choir, the big bombastic pieces of Final Fantasy music, this goes on that playlist, but it's going to be the one that's a character theme for one of our heroes. And I think that's super cool.
Yeah. My only 2 cents on this is that I think it's pretty interesting, whether it was intentional or not, by Drew and Ira to pick this song before what our next episode is. But did you guys hear a little bit of an unintentional hint for what Dion's theme kind of sounds like?
That's pretty cool.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and thank you to everyone who has reached out to us. Don't forget that we're doing a questioner listener grab bag Q&A episode coming up very soon after this next one. And so if you want us to talk about a specific piece of Final Fantasy music or other video game music, if it maybe lightly relates to Final Fantasy or not, just have fun with it. Just ask us questions. Forget about rules. There are no rules here. We're just having fun talking music. So get those in on social media, in the Discord, on the Patreon, however you do that, and make sure you're subscribed to all those things. Everything is Final Fantasy on Patreon, YouTube, which is being mean to us right now, so whatever about YouTube, but make sure you're following us on whatever your favorite podcast app is, and do the same, please, for Airship Overdrive, Ryan's project where you can hear arrangements of some of your favorite video game music. Be sure to join us next time when we seek the Chrono Trigger.
Drew's back.